Today we're going to be looking at the asteroid Pallas Athena and what that means for your birth chart, retrogrades, medical astrology, and the essential oils that can support you in your exploration of Pallas Athena. Welcome to this episode. My name is Adam and I'm joined by Liz today. How are you, Liz?
Well, first of all, I'm impressed by the introduction. That was excellent introduction of all the things we're going to cover. But yeah, I'm really interested to hear what you've got to say about Pallas Athena because there's so much written that goes off in different ways all over the place. So it's always fascinating to hear somebody else's opinion about it.
Well, let's dive in. And first of all, let's start with the name. Many people know the goddess Athena, which is, one of the key goddesses in Greek and Roman mythology. But where's this Pallas come from? So there are, what we find in many of the Greek and Roman myths is there's many different versions of it. But I guess an abbreviated version was Athena had a friend, a very close friend, by the name of Pallas. They were kind of having a bit of a scrap and a play fight one day, and she accidentally killed Pallas. So, in honor of her friend, Athena actually would sometimes carry and bear that name and be known as Pallas Athena as well. But when we look at the asteroid, it does really represent that energy of Athena and what we know of her as. As an asteroid, it's one of the major ones in that asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Now, although the asteroids aren't as big as the planets, they're closer. They're just between Mars and Jupiter. So Jupiter, Saturn, and all that we look beyond that, yeah, they're far, far away, even though they are big. So we can kind of toy which is more influential in your birth chart. And sometimes it's not so much about proximity or size of the astrological body, more just where they happen to be. For me, Pallas Athena sits right on my midheaven. So it was right at the top of the sky on the moment that I was born, which is quite interesting indeed. So, what do we find in Pallas Athena, and what does she kind of govern? So, if we look at her, she is a goddess of warfare or war, but she's not something like Mars, where she's going in and wanting to, get into battle straight away. In fact, battle would often be her last resort. She was a tactician, and she would look at how she could find diplomatic ways to solve different issues. And so when we look at where Pallas Athena is in our chart, it is often where you tend to take control and how you tend to lead and how you deal with conflicts. In a way that is intelligent and smart. So it can give a really strong indication of the way you like to fight and maybe how much you like to fight in that way as well. So she's a really interesting placement and can be really interesting where she lays out in your birth chart.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think that, well, first of all, there is another really famous version of how she got her name. Incidentally, that I found it really interesting when I was at uni the other day. We were doing we were learning about Homeric hymns, and there was a thing about epithets that hadn't really occurred to me before. An epithet is like the different naming of a god or a goddess. Um, and so Pallas Athena, she does have another really similar epithet, which is Athena Pallas. So the priestess who was in charge of everything that went on in Athens was the priestess of Athena Pallas, so back to front. And one of the things they say about the epithets was as much to do with how they were sung about in poems. It was an easy way to think that's four beats. I can put that in, as well as the personality of her. And there's a story about how the Olympians went to war with the gigantomancy, it's called, and I think if I remember right, the gigantomancy is on side of the pantheon. But she killed a giant called Pallas, and she took his skin and she used his skin to make her aegis, which is like the breastplate. I don't know if you can see, I've got her behind me. This used to be really quite blue. It's faded a lot, but this here is the aegis, and it was said that nobody could pierce the skin of the aegis. And so she's very well defended by this aegis. And what's also interesting is there's lots of myths that try to explain why it was that as a divine feminine, she worked with men. She didn't work with women. She worked with men, and she worked with the heroes. And often their strategic warfare was not necessarily about how they attacked, but how they defended. And so I'd be interested to see where Donald Trump is in his, because had he got strong Pallas Athena, I don't think he would have missed the Straits of Hormuz, for example. Like, you know, she was all about looking at all of the different aspects and making sure that you were defended and that you are doing things cleverly. And as you say, would rather have parlay, as Johnny Depp would say in the Pirates of Caribbean, parlay rather than aggressive um, warfare. And if you think about how you're quite right, we've talked about Mars and Aries. We've also talked about Eris and how she's like this fearsome strife. Athena is terrifying in her own right, but it's because she's very, very hard to beat.
Yeah, very, very smart and intelligent woman as well, type of thing. She would kind of, if we would get stereotypical, she would almost be like that feminine CEO, wouldn't she? Or that kind of feminine executive type of energy in that modern day interpretation. Now let's have a look at some essential oils. The first one I think you may struggle to um, resonate with because I know that anything that comes from down under just doesn't kind of vibe with you too much in that way. But I'm not actually choosing an Australian essential oil. I'm choosing a New Zealand essential oil. For some weird reason, Manuka always really resonates with me for Athena. Now, I do have some that are maybe a bit more traditionally Athenian to carry on with later. But I'm really interested in this story about Manuka when white settlers actually came to New Zealand. And of course, their way of growing food and sourcing food was through agriculture. So for the first time, what they did is they would strip the land back and they would just set everything on fire to get rid of all the natural flora. And then they could start growing their crops and making their fields and so on. But there's this one bloomin' plant that would grow back really quickly and kind of hold the soil together and stop erosion and stop everything falling apart. And that was the Manuka plant. Now, Manuka is well known for the honey that it provides for people all around the world trip over trying to get some Manuka honey. But also, when we distill the flowering branches, we get that beautiful Manuka essential oil. Now, when we work with Manuka essential oil on a metaphysical or a holistical way, it's a really beautiful oil for getting rid of our warring mentality. So I want you to think, and the classic example I often use is someone who's just gone through a big breakup or a divorce, and they fire up and their mind, they're not level-headed, and they almost want to, like, I'm going to take them for everything they've got. Manuka is a really great oil. It's soothing for the skin, but also soothing for the soul to get rid of that warring mentality and to be a bit rational and a bit more fair. There's obviously going to be there's going to be a bit of bee medicine in Manuka as well, in the essential oil, because the bees have such a relationship with this plant. And remember that a bee doesn't necessarily land on any part of the plant. It lands on the flower. It looks for the sweetness. It looks for the good part of the plant. And thus Manuka also helps us to look for the good in even our enemies. And when we look at this diplomacy that Athena kind of represents within us and how we are diplomatic, I find Manuka is a really beautiful oil for kind of bringing that out and harnessing that within ourselves and other people.
Well, you're wrong because Manuka is on my list, but I'm not going to explain why until we get there. When we go into the medical astrology, I will go into why.
Fair enough. Oh, well, I'm glad we've agreed on one. That's beautiful. So, but I am
Yeah,
going to
strong agreements. Yeah.
excellent. Well, I am going to come over to the European continent now. My next oil would be sage. You know, I think sage is a really great one. I use sage a lot. We all have those days or we all have those interactions when something has thrown us off kilter, when we're off balance. You know, a bad conversation, someone said something offensive, and again, we're not feeling very level headed. And what I love to do is I just get a bit of sage, I pop it in my hand, rub it together, breathe it in, and wave it around. And it's kind of like a quick, energetic smudge. Now, before you go grabbing your white sage and your white sage smudge sticks, which often can be taken from California, and there are some sustainability issues about that, I would actually go for my Spanish sage essential oil. I find the Spanish sage essential oil to help us to um, I guess, get rid of mental clutter so we can bring in that Athena aspect of how we're going to tackle this conflict, what we're going to do here, and be a bit more level headed. So I really love it for that. And when we understand our Pallas Athena sign, we can then go, right, this is what I tend to do. This is how it works. This is how it doesn't work for me. Let me use my Spanish sage. Right, let's use it to my advantage and not to my disadvantage. And so it's a really beautiful oil to work with in with Pallas Athena, I find.
Yeah, I think any kind of situation where you're looking for wisdom, which that's what she is, she's wisdom, then the sage family, the Salvias, are really, really relevant. I would go Clary Sage, simply because I am a bit worried about women using common sage. It makes you bleed. Spanish sage good. It's not an oil that I really ever use, but Clary Sage is all about clear sight, clear thinking, being able to try and drop out of the feelings and think clearly and in a detached manner. So yeah, I think sage is good.
Yeah, I think the Sage family is good. I tend to find Clary Sage to be a bit more feminine and emotional, whereas I find Spanish Sage mental and masculine. But like I wouldn't be strongly opposed to Clary Sage, but I think choose the Sage based on where you're at, maybe.
Are you seriously saying mental and masculine and emotional and feminine separately when you are about to get lynched? And also, Pallas Athena is the two, obviously the two bound
Yeah,
together, is not. Yeah.
yeah. I just find I use Clary Sage for more cleansing too much emotions and bringing those
I'm
clear eyes
pulling
on that side on that
Yeah,
type of thing. So
I'm pulling your leg.
that's all
It
right.
is very much about
Game
emotions
on.
and hormonal emotions, isn't it? And I think that that's a really valid point, really. When it's hormone, no, when one of its strengths is when the hormones are running your body, hormones are running the show. You don't think clearly,
Yeah.
and so being able to kind of take control of the chariot of the hormones and be able to think clearly. Yeah.
Yeah. Now the third one probably isn't as strong. I think it's more of a kind of a supplementary one. But I'm also going to go Thyme as well. I think Thyme is a really great one. It's got a tradition of being an oil that brings courage. It's also, I think, it brings things to the surface, and this is especially when Athena goes into retrograde. That things and situations will happen in your life where you start to question your approach because Athena is so wise as we spoke about. But when any planet or any asteroid or any astrological body goes into retrograde, she takes her assistance, she takes her help and her guidance away from the earth. So you're left on your own. So you don't have that kind of wisdom and that guidance of Pallas Athena at this time. And so you start to question, hold on, is this approach the right approach? Am I forcing things? Am I allowing things to be forced upon me? Am I steering away from conflict and am I avoiding conflict when I actually need to face it? And do I need to use time to give me that courage as well? The other thing I find really great about time is, I've worked where when people don't like the smell of an essential oil and there's no practical kind of explanation for that, like if you don't like lavender because you had a horrid grandmother, that's a different story. But if you're like, oh, I just don't like the smell of that, whereas other people love it, it can suggest something psychologically or deeper. Time normally suggests to me people come across that they have that they're got everything together and everything is fine. But if you go digging, there's something deep within that is festering, and they've maybe forgotten about it. It could have happened a year ago, a decade ago, when they're a childhood. But it keeps tripping them up in one way, and when time comes around, it's actually bringing that up so that it can be. It's time to face that. And during a Pallas Athena retrograde, things may come up where you go, hold on, I've been plowing along and I've been very successful and very victorious in my life, but there is something that trips me up. And it helps you to look at what you need to reconsider and how you can become even smarter by embracing the things that you refused to look at beforehand.
Yeah, I think within every hero story, there is a moment where it seems like the wind is blowing the wrong way or everything turns against them and they have to go into the cave and sort of regather and re-find who they are again. I mean, that's the story of Troy, really, of Achilles' anger, and he just won't be involved in the battle for a very long time, and then when he does, he's like so out of line with his behaviour, it's daft. But I think with Thyme, it's very much about that hero's journey of the ordinary person who finds a way to be incredibly brave.
Mm.
And I can remember actually, again going back to university. It's obviously it's a theme today. Today, I think when we're talking about classics, we had a long discussion about Greek philosophers and their feelings about how does one define courage, and this went on for a very long time. And we were asked how we defined courage, and I'd said, well, actually, I think I'm witnessing courage every single day. It was right in the middle of radiotherapy, and Daryl was just getting iller and iller and iller. And he got up and he got in that car and he went and he drove and he got there and he came back and he collapsed back on the settee. So sometimes bravery doesn't look like this huge battle, it's like completely internal, and that's what she rules, really, those psychological battles and how you overcome what is it I'm supposed to do, how am I brave. And sometimes actually one of the discussions that came up in that lecture was I'd offered that, and the lady said, she said, that really reminds me of somebody that I know. She said it was right when at the beginning of the Ukraine war, and there was a Ukraine lady married to an English man, and she decided she'd got to go back to Ukraine and try and get her mother out. And it was terrifying. She was going to go right through Russia to do it. And she said, it's so brave, but is it also really stupid? And there was this discussion in your head. Am I being brave or am I being really stupid? And I think that's very much a Pallas Athena kind of quandary that goes on.
Yeah, because all courage, I guess, is doing something a little bit stupid because there's some aspect of you that's warning you not to do it.
It's a
And
risk, isn't it? Whatever you do is a risk.
There's a lot happening in the world right now. There's wars, there's financial pressures, there's health concerns, and all of this can be quite overwhelming. Just open up social media and you're going to be subjected with all these different things which can kind of drag you into more and more gloom. I've been reflecting on this recently, and then I think about when I just step out my own back door and immerse myself in nature. Nature helps us to find peace, harmony, and to put everything into perspective. Recently, I've wanted to try and help people to engage a bit more with nature through different gifts of nature, such as essential oils and crystals and so on. But being able to stretch out and reach people that way is often through that overwhelming social media. So I've come up with a solution. I've created a collective, a community where we can all gather and we can share our experiences with our oils, with our crystals, with nature, as the animals sing and dance and talk to us in different ways. And I'd like to invite you to join this community. It's called the Living with Nature Collective, and it is available to you to come in and interact and meet like-minded people. Our life is generated by what we give attention to, and it's time to start giving more attention to nature in a way that you're not surrounded by other barrages of information. I'd like to offer you a 7-day free trial for my new collective, and if you look at the link below, you can click today and check it out. Come in, introduce yourself, meet other people, and be able to experience live classes, pre-recorded classes, conversations, polls, work out what's happening astrologically, what crystals are the best for you right now, and have your questions answered by me and other experts as well. I'm really excited to launch this new initiative of the Living with Nature Collective, so please check out the link below, come say hi, and I look forward to seeing you there.
medical astrology. I'm really interested in what you have to say about medical astrology and Pallas Athena.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting, actually. So Demetra George has written a lot about it. And I'm really bad because I've forgotten the lady that gave her the idea, and that should have been the lady I quoted, really. But she talks about how it's the immune system. And I would say, I have to say myself, I would say it's the endocannabinoid system, part of the immune system. But they did some really interesting work on tracking Pallas Athena and another asteroid called Wuhan when it was moving through COVID, through coronavirus. And what they were able to show, really interesting, you should go and look it up if this is interesting to you, because it's beautifully written by Dimitri George as well. They were able to show at what point the like the collective immune system of the planet started to fight the virus. And they were showing, and I talked a few weeks ago, didn't I, about Juno and how we had that locked in effect, and how we were being restrained. And they're able to show, right, almost like the passage of the vaccine, and how the world started to manage defending itself against this bloody virus that was just could manipulate from every pop. You know, it was always morphing, always changing, always attacking in a different way. It was like this alien creature attacking the planet, and how Pallas Athena's movements were in the immune system of the body, which was really interesting piece of work. And I completely agree with that. I think that she does. And that's why I kind of at the beginning said I think that she is defensive, you know, how the body defends itself. And this is why I had also put Manuka, because I think that these sort of excuse me, there is definitely a lot of Australian oils that are to do with the immune system, to do with immunity generally. So eucalyptus was up there because eucalyptus is really good at the 1,8-cineol is really good at being able to be virucidal, of protecting us against actually putting our hands on and putting it in our mouth and whatever, and it's all right through me. But also that's the virucidal, but the antiviral of when it's in the body, the immune system of the body overpowers it and goes, no, you are not going to unenvelope. So that seems to be really a Pallas Athena to me, of being, well, you're here, but I'm not going to let you spread, you know. But in order to be able to do that, one needs to have a really healthy endocannabinoid system. You know, we can't have any kind of autoimmune. So then we got, I'm going to say things like black pepper, but Copaiba, I think. The way that Copaiba also has this immunity aspect, but it also says just calm flames. You know, well, let's not just go off like Mars straight away. Let's think. I mean, we should be careful to make her not sound like she's not a war goddess, because she definitely is. You know, if there's no other way, she is going to do war. But the endocannabinoid system does that. It says, like, let's just keep feeding information back. I just want information, postsynaptic information between the nerves, what's going on. So I would say it rules the endocannabinoid system myself. And then, so those would be my three, right? Really. That I would also say, like, oils that have omega-3 and omega-6 in them as well probably come under that rulership of being able to really make the body strong, to be, you know, to be resilient. I also think there is another aspect which I really don't understand why nobody else has said it. Do you know how Athena was born?
Yes, but can I remember it right in this very moment? No. Tell us.
Okay, so Zeus
That's right.
made Metis, who was a nymph, pregnant. And Metis was wisdom. You know, she was like a minor goddess who was wisdom. And because she was pregnant, a great plan would be to swallow her. And so he kind of birthed, and he got this horrific headache. And what was really lucky was Hephaestus was on hand with an axe and smashed Zeus's head open. And she was born from his head fully formed in armor. So she's got this, like, she's born as a protective, like, able to defense. But I don't see why she's not migraine as well. I think that migraine has got to be a thing with her. So it'd be interesting to look and see where she was in people's. If people came and said, "I've got migraines," where do we see her on the chart? Because I can't see how she's not migraine.
I must say at this point as well that we have talked about lots of different natural remedies, but if you do get a migraine, we don't recommend an axe to the head.
Well, I don't know. If you clearly have never had a migraine, because I think it feels like an axe in the head. That's exactly what it feels like, and I've definitely wanted to cut my bloody head off when I've had one. Definitely.
One little thing I do want to add when you mentioned eucalyptus, I think eucalyptus is a beautiful example as well because it is so cooling and it's one of the best oils I find for anger. And again, it cleanses away like sage does. It cleanses away the heat and the anger, which makes us to be irrational and allows us to be a bit more cool-headed or level-headed as well. So I think that's a really great choice there.
Yeah, and actually, if we're gonna pull it a little bit, if somebody has a migraine, it's really hard to deal with essential oils, I have to say. But one of the things that I always talk about with any kind of chronic situation is that I would cleanse the liver using essential oils, hepatic essential oils like eucalyptus and liver meridians. So there is that there, but I think that natural defense is the main aspect. Yeah.
So I think Athena, we've now looked at the 4 major asteroids, and if we were looking them up on a birth chart, their asteroid numbers are 1, 2, 3, and 4. And what's so beautiful about all of them is if we look at traditional astrology, we have the moon, which is the archetype of a mother, and Venus, which is the archetype of a lover. And so in traditional astrology, those were the only 2 feminine archetypes that are really represented. But as we start to unpack Athena and Vesta and Juno and Ceres, and then we can go deeper into other asteroids like Psyche and Hecate and so on. It really shows us the different feminine archetypes that we all have within us. And the more we can understand how they present and how they play out in our astrology, in our personality, and in our life, it allows us to get a more comprehensive understanding of ourselves. So I think it's really worth people taking time to get to know the placement of those 4 asteroids in their chart.
Yeah, definitely. I really think. I mean, we did a lot of work about the dwarf planets, and to me, I find them very kind of cerebral. We think about them, but I don't really feel them that much in my life. But I really engage with the asteroids a lot. I think that they have a lot of information to give us about ourselves, definitely.
So we would encourage you, if you haven't listened to all 4 episodes, definitely check them out. Then have a look at the placement of these 4 in your birth chart. And then you've got a list of essential oils that will work really well. Diving into them at different times when you feel a need to call on one of those archetypes, or if you notice maybe on my social media or somewhere else that one of the asteroids has gone into retrograde, that's a really good time to give it some attention because that's when the issues tend to arise as well. We'll be back next week when we dive into other magical ways to work with your essential oils. Until then, take care and blessed be.
Bye-bye.
I'm Elizabeth Ashley, UK Director for the National Association of Holistic Aromatherapy and founder of the Aromatic Mystery School, where essential oils meet the deeper, more mystical side of healing. Here you'll explore the spiritual, emotional and energetic dimensions of plants and learn how to weave them into your own rituals and well-being practices. If you're ready to work in a way that nourishes both your soul and your senses, join us at the Aromatic Mystery School. The link's right below.
Life moves fast. There's constant noise, urgency, and pressure, and so much happening in the world right now that can leave you feeling depressed, drained, defeated. Somewhere amongst all the noise, you feel a quiet calling within, suggesting that something is missing, like you've drifted away from what really matters. But nature hasn't gone anywhere. She's still there, waiting for you to return. That's why the Living with Nature Collective exists. A global, interactive community of like-minded people. Your tribe. Discover how to return to living in flow with the seasons, blossoming, shining, releasing and pausing with the land. Each week, you'll discover simple ways to connect with crystals, essential oils, astrology, the moon, animal wisdom, angels, and more. If you've been looking for something, you've found it. Step back into the garden, the forest, the ocean. Join the Living with Nature Collective today.